How are you? Good evening and welcome to this long-awaited live stream today. Based on everything we're seeing, I've had several doubts about doing this live stream, especially regarding the strategy for broadcasting it. On the one hand, we've mentioned that there is indeed a fictitious and false scenario and a real scenario of how they're doing everything they're doing and everything that's yet to come, without ever forgetting the global objective. In the last few minutes, I've perhaps decided to start directly with the real scenario so that you understand, and we'll divide the program, as we always do, using the scientific method. Having a plausible hypothesis of high suspicion, which most of you already know. That will provide answers as to why they've chosen the mouse, why a cruise ship, but also a plane, also a stadium, and so on. We're going to divide it, as I say, into 4 parts. To begin with, we'll start with a rigorous scientific method, the chronology of what's going to happen based on the extensive research that I have carried out. The chronology, as I say, that's going to happen. All the derivatives, considering the various implications that this entire complex might potentially have, and exploring what we can realistically achieve in a second part regarding this matter, specifically from the perspective of the various restrictions already being discussed, and especially the management of mental resources, and precisely how we ought to be directing our personal energy, both internal and external, into our daily actions. And of course, emotional management so that it doesn't take its toll on us. So, as I always do, we'll have that minute, not for advertising, but to introduce the title sequence, so you feel comfortable and see the real origin of what's about to happen, and what we've initially titled as the beginning for everything that will follow. Make yourselves comfortable. You're among family. You're among our family at La Quinta Columna. We'll start in a minute. We've said that we're always guided by the scientific method, and regarding everything they're talking about, we know there's a fictitious scenario and a real scenario. What's the high suspicion hypothesis? I'm going to enable the chat to see it live. What is the high suspicion hypothesis that you have regarding whether there could really be deaths, people could start falling ill, and so on? I'm waiting for someone to put the first word in the chat. Of course. The main theory is indeed about electromagnetic radiation and a certain frequency band. Furthermore, as you know, amplified by the presence of a mineral, quite implanted in most people, in human biology, okay? But let's say the main cause is radiation and a certain frequency peak that we're going to see. And that mineral, precisely at certain frequencies, has a radiation peak. We're going to start with a screen that is, as I say, all too enlightening. When we do a little survey to see where, effectively, we're going to go ahead and share our screen now, and here precisely we've done a comprehensive little survey of where the industries or institutions are mainly located, where those 26 gigahertz that are within the famous 5G Advanced or 5G Plus, just as the prototype of 5G was 4G Plus, the prototype, let's say, of the 26 gigahertz in the K-band is 5G Advanced or 5G Plus, and we are currently wondering precisely where they're actually starting to operate with that frequency band. Yeah, they appear in football stadiums. It's used to manage massive data peaks, thousands of people who might be uploading videos at the same time, eh? Also in concerts, you'll see that later, for example. But here, now ports and airports appear. Here, the crucial factor isn't the speed of a passenger's mobile phone connection, but the automated logistics. In fact, the first option for the 26 gigahertz has been in ports. What's the relationship between a port, a cruise ship, and a boat? Come on, let's start. You have to give it a bit of thought. Well, normally, cruise ships and boats dock in port. What is the stowaway par excellence? In all the elements of navigation on a ship? Well, you can look it up. It's the rodent, the mouse. Well, now you have the perfect excuse. Rats, since ancient times, have been, let's say, the infiltrated stowaway on the decks, in the holds of ships, cruise liners, and so on. Therefore, it's no coincidence that new cases of zoonosis linked to hantavirus or norovirus are apparently appearing, as you'll see in some news reports later, related not to a virus, but to radiation events. But it's also striking that most of the news reports talk about cases on aeroplanes. If you've noticed, what's the connection between the aeroplane and the airport? Well, it lands or takes off, obviously. There are reports of various news cases. They tell us about cases which are quite clearly fictitious ones of supposed and alleged infections within the commercial aviation environment. Remember that the sick are transported by plane and now the flight attendant and so on. But it also mentions football stadiums and concerts. And precisely, we have on our doorstep, what? The World Cup stage, which somehow already converges in the minds of most people, even those who believe the official version, that a mass event where there's close contact that they've talked about so much, although they finally say it's not necessary either, well, it will effectively be, let's say, the event that will spread Hantavirus, norovirus, and everything worldwide. But what is there in football stadiums? The 26 gigahertz. And at concerts? And now you have to remember and look back at those news stories we saw in 2023 and 2024, where there were concerts where teenagers, who all went like this because it was a necessary and sufficient condition to attend, as many as 8 died from arrhythmias, of which there were, I don't know how many heart attacks. Remember that video we showed of the firemen? Do you remember it? Do you remember those alleged stampedes in Seoul where people were dropping dead in the street? And it wasn't really about stampedes as such, because there were no videos of that, nor were there even any fractures to that effect. Do you want more proof in this regard? Let's look at an example. Let's go, for example, heading over to the ports located in Spain now. Right then, okay? Regarding the 26 gigahertz. And we see Barcelona. Take note of the cities if possible. Barcelona, obviously, the benchmark. It's the city where the rollout's most visible, especially the free trade zone and the port. It's used, they say, for advanced logistics projects and autonomous crane control. We're talking about, I'll put it down here, the 26 gigahertz. Can you see them up here in the top right-hand corner? The port of Barcelona. This study, from a statistical point of view, is to find the pattern as we did with the famous care homes. Now, the care homes, in the case at hand, are the ports, airports, and football stadiums and concerts. Right? This is the origin, not of the antivirus, just as the other wasn't of the coronavirus, but of the radiation. Let's look at another image. Specifically, now in Madrid. In Madrid, there's no port in principle, but we do have the 26 gigahertz. How? In stadiums and stations, tests and rollouts have been done in high traffic areas like Atocha, meaning airports, and around the Bernabeu and Metropolitano stadiums to manage data peaks. Tests have been carried out. The problem is that their bursts, it's not constant, are measuring with a device, with this one here, which is particularly expensive, as many of you know. I'll show it full screen. And what we have are peaks. They're not constant signals. It also says in the tables, as an innovation center, they have 26 gigahertz nodes to test industrial and virtual reality applications. Later, we'll see what implication that has on human biology with what we know now. Let's look at another case. Malaga. Remember the cities? We've said Barcelona, we've said Madrid. Let's go with Malaga, the Spanish Silicon Valley, the Andalusia Technology Park, the Malaga Tech Park, Malaga Port. In fact, the ports, I repeat, have been where they first started emitting signals and burst peaks at 26 gigahertz. There are also agreements with operators to test private networks. I say ports because precisely at the ports is where cruise ships especially end up. Moving on to the next thing. It's Seville's turn, precisely. In the port of Seville, the situation with the 26 gigahertz band is particularly relevant, as Seville has become the main laboratory for the evolution of 5G in Spain. They're also talking about 5G Plus or 5G Advanced in the port of Seville. And here we'll see later that precisely regarding the concerts, very close by. It's precisely the famous Rosalia concert tonight, which just started barely a few minutes ago with Netflix coverage and of course the 26 gigahertz. And the other city that appears to me, just in our country, you can extrapolate this study to any other part of the world, depending on the cases that come our way. Of course, Valencia. So we've said Barcelona, Madrid, Malaga, Seville, and Valencia. Some of the largest cities in the country. The smart port, the Port of Valencia, is one of the key points in Spain for the use of this frequency, 26 gigahertz. It's used for the smart port, communication between ships, lorries, and the port infrastructure. Is that clear? Well then, let's look now at a couple of news items that indeed refer to this, to the frequency allocation of the famous 5G. It says the latest 26 gigahertz band, located at a much higher frequency, has enough bandwidth to provide extreme speeds in the environment closest to the antennas, which makes it suitable for providing coverage through microcells in spaces with a high density of users, such as stadiums, airports, and mass events. So you see that 5G indeed serves the whole issue of football stadiums, concerts, airports, ports, and so on. Specifically, 26 gigahertz. I've mentioned, and you've seen it, that peak in frequency bursts, where they alternate between the 2.4, 3.5 gigahertz that exist now and the 26 gigahertz in bursts to cover that demand that apparently there may be in airports, ports, football stadiums, and so on. It was in 5 cities: Barcelona, Madrid, Malaga, Seville, and Valencia. Now we're going to see 5 news items where, lo and behold, once again, coincidence, which is obviously causality, we're being told again about cases of Hantavirus. The one about the little mouse, the cruise ship stowaway, and you'll understand why they've chosen that one specifically. In 5 Spanish cities. The first news item is, that will obviously expand later, eh? What's going to expand is the 5G Advanced network and the 26 gigahertz. The first news item that reached us is this one here. Sorry, this other one that Miguel Angel just sent me, and I've already told him to stop for a bit. You see that also. Now they're talking about norovirus, but on ships, right? And the symptoms are those of radiation, vomiting and diarrhea. Later, we'll talk about the level of impact depending on the doses, those who've had them for a long time, those who haven't, those who've had them recently, and so on. We'll start with the first news item, which is this one here, and it refers to a first city. Firstly, here they're talking about the Gomez Ulla. This is a military hospital, which is why this person appears Margarita Robles, which is located in Madrid. It detected failures in the isolation unit that could pose a risk with Hantavirus. In other words, they're already warning us that in Madrid, where their hospital is, the Gomez Ulla, there could be an outbreak there. And you're going to realize that the outbreaks of the alleged hantavirus are precisely in the areas or cities where they're starting to broadcast for the first time. Bursts of 26 gigahertz. This is Madrid. You just saw it at Olivia. Let's go with the second one. Health authorities report a new asymptomatic contact in Catalonia. Barcelona. This woman stopped in Barcelona from the woman who died of hantavirus and traveled on the plane. They're bringing the plane into it again, and of course, Catalonia. Remember Barcelona? Let's look at another city. I'm telling you, in real time, exactly at our country's level, on our small scale, precisely where they tell us there are cases. And you, logically, have to make the comparison with exactly where they're emitting the 26 gigahertz. But not just the place, but the specific location, matching it with a plane, then with the stadiums for what's coming in the very near future, as you well know, with the start of the World Cup on the 13th of June, and at the airports. The next news item is this one inner. Health authorities are investigating, as you've heard, a possible suspected case of hantavirus in the Valencian community. Blimey, Valencia, we've also seen it as a city, haven't we? Let's see the next one. Now they're talking about planes. Planes with hantavirus infected people change stopover from Malaga to Valencia. Here they introduce Malaga. They're trying to imply with the news, which is obviously from the fictitious scenario, that Malaga could be a suspected outbreak site. Well, because planes have come in that have changed their stopover precisely in Malaga. Let's go with the next one. We were missing one, Seville. Seville actually has a port. It's even navigable, but it lacks direct sea access. But in Seville, what are they telling us? Well, it's also been in the news in all of this, apart from Rosalia's concert. The Virgen del Rocío Hospital in Seville will be able to receive patients infected with hantavirus because they have an isolation unit, the best in Europe, they say. They're already implying that Seville could be the recipient of a hantavirus outbreak. And I'm speaking in their language so that you understand me. So I'll stop here. Do you realize that precisely where they emit bursts of 26 gigahertz coincides exactly with the outbreaks of suspected hantavirus, norovirus, and whatever else they want? Do you also know full well that the symptoms they describe are precisely those of acute radiation? That it won't be the same or much less efficient in terms of damage. Between those who go like this and those who don't. Or those who go multiple times and those who don't have it or have less. This is a matter of dosage, both from the mediated intoxication and the intoxication from electromagnetic pollution. But the thing is, 26 gigahertz has a very characteristic peculiarity regarding that element that's been introduced into biology, and which evidently, in an unequivocally conclusive, scientifically reliable way, pioneered here with Dr. Pablo Campra, Madrid, at the request of La Quinta Columna and in other parts of the world. We know, we've seen the microscope, we're going to do it again 1,000 times if necessary, even live. It's present in the injectables. Did you know that a specific frequency is about to be transmitted, which coincides exactly with the absolute peak level of resonance and transistor effect amplification for a mineral located within the biological makeup of humans. It's a process similar to activating a remote device, which doesn't necessarily take effect immediately, although that transistor effect will precisely catalyze all the damage we've seen recently in a much shorter time frame. Cleverly, the official fictitious version is going to tell you about an incubation period of 45 days. Why? Well, because it's the beginning of May. And 45 days from now, where will we be? In what setting? A massive one. And of course, with 26 gigahertz coverage, we'll be at the World Cup. And what is everyone falsely going to believe? Well, that this will indeed be the point of close and massive contact on a global, international level, which will spread the hantavirus throughout the world and the planet. And right after that, what comes next? Well, in The Economist magazine, another process of mass implantation. The second global mass implantation process, because you'll see that Moderna is already getting ahead and so on. In fact, in case you didn't know, the World Cup will indeed be officially hosted in Mexico, but where it will do the most damage is in the United States and Canada, especially in the United States, due to the deployment of the famous 5G advanced. 2026 World Cup in Mexico, the United States and Canada. The stadiums and venues for the FIFA World Cup, football obviously. This starts on the 13th of June, and I think it goes on, I don't know how long it'll last, but since the incubation period is long, they tell us. And since they also mentioned the subject of concerts, it particularly caught my attention that it's been done a massive turnout in the city of Seville here, free of charge. And the tickets that they haven't been able to fill, Netflix has practically given them away, with coverage, obviously, in the city of Seville, which is the famous Rosalía concert, regardless of where this lady stands and what she might do from a ritualistic point of view and so on. I'm referring to this concert that's taking place right at this moment. Tickets to see Rosalía are insufficient. This is the only way to get into the Netflix event. After the free passes ran out, something very strange happened as well, which is that the mayor of the city of Seville has decided to fence the whole area off. And naturally, loads of people have reported it and complained because they can't, so they don't see the concert. But obviously, all of this smells very fishy. Nothing necessarily has to happen from what they do, whether they broadcast or not, but could they use a massive concert with the excuse that there's hantavirus there, someone coming off a ship? Because if 70,000 people are coming, some infected person will show up. Well, as a matter of fact, you should know that I'm actually going to present to you a detailed image regarding the port of Seville, which is the specific location where the concert is exactly, right over here if you take a look. Seville has been the pioneer city in Spain for the 5G advanced rollout by Mass Orange. This rollout specifically includes the 26 gigahertz millimeter band. It's important because if they all go hand in hand with graphene, this one in particular is carrying us in its arms. Designed to offer speeds of up to 5 gigabytes per second in areas with a high concentration of people. Strategic location, limited range. The 26 gigahertz waves have a short range, between 300 and 450 meters. So if they exist for this event, they'd be installed in buildings very close to the floating stage at the Torre del Oro. Because don't miss this, they've set up a floating stage for Rosalía at the Torre del Oro, and people will be all round the Guadalquivir River, obviously. But, of course, if we go specifically via Google Maps to the Torre del Oro, and here's the river, as you can see, here's the river right here, and the concert on that floating stage is right behind it. Look here, we have a mobile phone antenna. A cube, practically, and this small one here are two camouflaged 5G mobile phone antennas. It just depends on what they want to do to later talk about an outbreak specifically in the city of Seville. So once more then, from the fifth column, we are seeing the origin in much the same way as we initially saw it in the care homes. What was happening in the care homes? Well, through what they called the flu vaccine, which were also analysed here, even those from before 2017 didn't have that. And from 2017 onwards, they started to have that. At the end of 2019, 4G Plus started to be broadcast. Since 2016, the legislation was changed and they placed mobile phone masts in the vicinity of care homes. I personally did a study with 276 care homes, proving that in all those homes that were hit by those pneumonias they called COVID lung and so on, there was precisely a mobile phone mast in the vicinity, very close by. You even know that care assistants working in the homes called us and told us that they actually followed several tips from here at the fifth column just to try moving the elderly to another wing because they could practically see the mast through the window where they were already practically dead, and they began to improve spontaneously. Now we have exactly the same thing, but applied to the little mouse. Before it was a bat, a pangolin, which is their fictitious scenario. Now the fictitious scenario is the mouse and rodents. Now it's the rat's turn. Poor thing, what can we do? But the real scenario, which is where we all have to converge and aim directly at the bullseye in the head, is the 26 gigahertz. Now we're going to start talking a bit about the version, I was going to say COVID greed. It can't be called COVID greed now because they're not talking about COVID now. They're talking about Hantavirus. So what they say, remember now, fictitious scenario. Well, obviously, as the implantation, and by implantation, I mean this, they have to do it to human beings, right? Well, what has to happen? They have to invent a variant for the mouse, which they call the Andean one, that has the capacity to be transmitted to humans. Listen, but it was in Antarctica. It doesn't matter. You're going to see that all the news will converge towards the point that in the end, everything involves a lockdown, social isolation of all human beings, confinement, whatever you want to call it. And later we'll see why. Of course, mask wearing, head imbalance, and so on. And we'll also look into why in depth. And of course, ultimately, the massive implantation, like in 2020, 2021, in 2026, 2027, another second implantation process. But then the World Cup arrives. And after the World Cup comes August. And in August, we've already spoken about the famous eclipse. External electromagnetic noise zero, a combined blackout most likely that they've told us so much about. Electromagnetic noise zero, both internal and external. And what do we have now? Testing of 26 gigahertz signals. From where? From space. Over 12,000 satellites, including Starlinks, sending and emitting on the CAF frequency at 26 gigahertz. Haven't they already spoken about the famous zombie pandemic? Haven't they already spoken about that variant they've called precisely zombie? Probably. Keep this in mind. They'll tell you it was a combination, a mutation of hantavirus, norovirus, and coronavirus. And what we're actually going to see are hybrids, not from a genetic point of view. So, of course, evidently, to feed their fictitious scenario, well, they have to talk about hantavirus superspreaders. The study revealing that human-to-human transmission isn't just limited to close contact, to enable the belief that all this can indeed be passed on. And that we're talking about, of course, let no one doubt it. A virus of the hantavirus family type, norovirus, whatever they want. But you have to know that these are radiation events, something we've been warning about. Well, practically for 5 years now, and that you mustn't lose sight of. In all this intricate web of deceit and lies, well, they do exactly what they feel they must do: lie and deceive. It's precisely the beast's unmistakable hallmark. So we're going to see a series of the very same actors, that we're going to be presenting to you right here. Let's watch the first video and make all this a bit more engaging. Let's see, the same actors, the usual ones, you know, the acting, and of course some new ones they introduce. In this sense, they literally prostitute themselves. They pay, well, to carry out the beast's agenda. Firstly, direct actors. Well, we have this gentleman.
On board the MV Hondius, and what's happening right now is very real for all of us here. We're not just a story. We're not just headlines.
Curiously, you see he's crying. They resort to emotion. They pull at the heartstrings. The sentimental. For what? Well, to reach the sensitive fibre of the human being. But as I say, curiously, this gentleman is called Jake. Now we're going to see it here. We'll look directly at his page. He's an influencer and has literally acted throughout his life. That's to say, he has worked, in the world of acting. There's just one more coincidence. For example, let's share the screen and see his website, where curiously he's deleted some videos. He's called Jake, an influencer from Boston. Look, he has 86,700 followers, but his videos have shot up. 1.2 million views, 3 million views, 2.8 million views. Apparently, he talks about nature, do you see? Well, this is his Instagram, and interestingly, an influencer, that is, someone with the ability to spread a message, and even more so now through social media, is the one telling us the story of what's happening on the cruise, on the original cruise, let's say. Obviously, just like back in 2020, 30 billion inconsistencies are going to come out because the basis they're starting from is obviously false. And there'll be no shortage of supporting or lead actors, depending on the country, whom you already know only too well. For example, Horseface here, who's already told us, voluntary? We're off to a bad start. We let 14 people circulate freely with a possibility of incubating a virus with a fatality rate of 30%. In other words, feeding the fictional scenario, the idea that all this is due to a zoonotic virus that comes from mice and its corresponding mutations, variants like the Andean one, and so on, which is the one transmitted to humans, which is why it killed them. And some might wonder, well, what about the Spaniards on the ship? Don't they make video calls or send posts on their social media when practically everyone has several social media accounts these days? Is it only this actor, specifically the influencer, who comes to light? It's strange, isn't it? We haven't heard anything from them. And if the incubation period really was 45 days, then how is it possible they've already died? How long did the cruise last? Did it last more than a month and a half? Has anyone asked that? Oh no, they tell us to cover up that apparent flaw, that there was an Argentine couple who travelled, who were photographers, and they got off in an area that was essentially nothing more than a dumping ground for bird droppings and urine, and they captured several photographs there. But there were also rodents, and that's where they caught Hantavirus. That's what they've explained to us directly. Of course, they have to cover up one lie with others. We've talked about Horseface, but obviously the usual characters will also appear in the political sphere for those who defend Vox. As the party that was going to save us, well, their flagship appears, this Stegman fella who enriched himself with nearly 800,000 euros from the purchase of inoculations they called vaccines. Do you remember? What kind of joke is this, that contacts of hantavirus patients are allowed to decide whether to quarantine or not? Given that the tests have false negatives, but what tests? And we wonder, do they already have the PCR, the polymerase chain reaction for hantavirus? Did they have it here too, in Madrid, in Tenerife? Whereabouts? In the Canaries. They've already got the Hantavirus sequencing and the Andean variant, which is the one that comes from Antarctica, and they've already put it into the PCR to show that the amplified material tests positive. Well, guess who's the role? Don't you worry, because unfortunately we're going to experience it again. What many people have done who've criticized us and have literally prostituted themselves, that one who was in physiotherapy, that one who had a small pharmacy, the one with a health shop who supposedly sold food supplements, to literally rake it in, selling PCRs and masks at the expense of death and deception, or the deception that's led to the death and illness of many people. And we're going to see it again. They're prostitutes. And we've got those right here next to us, eh? They're going to take advantage of the situation. You're going to see the balcony clapping again, and then we'll look at the real scenarios that you're going to, so that you're prepared, especially on a mental level. Let's look at more actors. How could he be missing? The apparently dissident psychiatrist, Dr. Garona. That's why he has a TV station, and you done. Nor do we. What's more, we have this, and the Subdirectorate General for Audio-Visual Communication Services wants to take it away from us. Dr. Guiona says 45 minutes were enough for the flight attendant. You see the environment of planes and airports where there's 26 gigahertz to get infected. This is the one from the program Horizonte. He's also appeared, among many others, and those who will appear. Don't punish yourselves with this. Don't beat yourselves out. Of course. In the field of mystery, but not dissident, the false dissidents in the field of mystery. Iker Jimenez, the one who could see the coronavirus. Remember him? And how it turned lungs into marble, he said. Yesterday on Horizon, the experts insisted a lot that the ship should be anchored and not docked. It was the logical option. Man, Iker, it's the logical option given the belief that there really is a virus. But whether you dock the ship or not, if you have the specific frequency, it seems to me that people are going to get ill. You'll see how all this spreads, because the global expansion of 26 gigahertz is what you need to understand. No virus is going to spread, obviously. The 26 gigahertz are spreading in the 5G technological implementation program that was planned. Has any other character appeared around here? Which is this gentleman? Of course, the one about the experts. The one with the hair. Deadly virus heading for Spain. Canarian residents and workers caught between outrage and fear. Don't let them come. Of course, the media is just fueling all of this. Don't think for a second they'll invite me on TV to say, look, the outbreaks of what you call Hantavirus and the stowaway mouse on the cruise ship are appearing in those places where 26 gigahertz is being emitted. And 26 gigahertz goes hand in hand with a material they've already introduced into everyone's biology, which we analysed right here. This is another so-called expert. These people, Markham, the usual media outlets, for instance. The newspaper El País says, at first it was thought that everyone entered the same enclosed space with the mouse droppings, and that they breathed in the same contaminated air. Just look at how twisted they are. In the news, but who's going to get on a plane with mouse droppings and urine just to breathe it in? But the idea of human-to-human transmission from a first infected person is being considered more and more. Like Patient Zero, once again feeding the official false narrative, a fictional scenario, which unfortunately is going to take many lives due to radiation events and then, above all, mediated poisoning. I hope people here have the sense, if not to have listened to our real scientific analyses, then at least to what they've seen in their own environment and around them. I think we have another one. This is no coincidence. Doesn't it strike you as odd that the cover of The Economist for December 2025, January 2026 is a cruise ship? And some will say, oh, they've predicted it, they've guessed it, they can see the future. Look, no, it's because the heads of The Economist magazine, the Rothschild family, are in the global elite of, let's say, human beings, not literal bugs, and through their lodges they know the plan. You'll see the other one later. The other cover, obviously, because it shows like the hands of a clock where they're going to lead us, but portraying their fictional scenario and not ours. Look at the images they could have used. They didn't have to use a cruise ship. In this world of coincidence. Well, let's take a closer look at some other images now that a great many of you will find fuel this fictional scenario. Remember, that's exactly what we're talking about now, if that's all right with everyone. The first one is this right here. Attention, pay close attention to the video because I'm going to explain it clearly. In other words, after the analysis we're about to do of the fictitious scenario of what they're proposing, we have to focus on what's actually going to happen. And here we're talking about the real cause. Take a look at this gentleman in the lab coat.
A zoonotic virus, meaning it comes from animals and jumps to humans. What happens is that additionally, this specific strain from the Andes is...
No, initially you told us it didn't jump to humans, that it was very difficult. But you see how bit by bit the idea is sinking in that there's a variant like that, eh? And that variant is exactly the one that got onto the ship via that mouse, because it was brought by that couple who were photographing the shit, the feces and the urine of a mouse.
It's spreadable between people. How does it spread? It's from rodent feces, often as particles of dried waste float in the air and are inhaled.
Now it turns out the ship floats in the air as well. Before, with the coronavirus, you told us about saliva and aerosols. Now it turns out shit does too. I'm asking, because you're a professor at San Pablo CEU, mouse shit floats in the air. As if they were fungal spores, a fungal infection, right?
And then if there's more direct contact, one of these rodents bites you, or you touch the feces and put your hands to your mouth or whatever, then it also occurs as the primary contact.
Well, I think you're making it up, or you haven't properly read the university's protocol indoctrination.
Between the animal and the human being. What happens is that this strain has been shown that if there's quite intense and deep contact over time and so on, it can also be spread between people. And this is also what's happened in this outbreak we're currently experiencing, right? The viral conditions.
Right, what I'm about to say now is important. It's been proven. Where has it been proven? Pay attention now, eh?
They all look a bit alike. You had a kind of severe flu, Russell.
All the same.
Pains, high fever, fatigue, a feeling of tiredness. What happens is that in...
What he just said, what is it? Symptoms of what? Shall we look for it? We'll look for the scientific article. I'll put it in later when I edit the video. Symptoms of acute radiation.
But in this case, very frequently, the issue leads to a very serious pulmonary condition with fluid in the lungs.
A very serious pulmonary condition with fluid in the lungs. When does that happen? Radiation causes exactly what he said before. The, let's say, normal symptoms that they're now going to call symptomatic, asymptomatic, mild, and so on. Do you know which one is the lung symptom? The scientific articles are clear. I presented it directly at the 2023 conference, analysing what they called a vaccine in front of 400 people on a 24 square metre screen. We've done it here. Do you know that graphene, once introduced via the intramuscular or intravenous route, is primarily eliminated through the lungs? Usually after 10 days, 2 weeks, and they're already telling you about cases of pneumonia, lung inflammation, fibrosis, and of course fluid on the lungs, obviously. So those who are really going to have lung issues are the ones who've been jabbed with something before, the recently inoculated, and then exposed to radiation.
It's shortness of breath. I mean, difficulty breathing.
Difficulty breathing because scalar radiation. affects a molecule called oxyhemoglobin, whose function is to transport oxygen in the blood for all functions. So it gives you the feeling that the air you breathe is just like with COVID, because COVID is radiation, obviously. It feels like the air you breathe isn't metabolizable. That's to say, it's not useful. It's all because, let's say from a functional point of view, the oxygen isn't. And it's the direct effect of scalar radiation. We'll post that scientific article.
The person needs, therefore, a hospital, they need an ICU, they need a ventilator, and then...
The ventilator. You know what happened with ventilators in 2020? They're feeding all that.
And then in this strain, less so. But in others, there are also sometimes episodes of internal renal hemorrhages, especially.
Renal cases. This is the translation. People who were inoculated a year ago, half a year, 2 years, where the body has managed to eliminate most of that material, as it's almost impossible to eliminate it all, we know that 50% of that material, graphene, has disappeared from the body after about a year, and it'll depend a bit on multiple variables, such as diet, exercise, supplementation, radiation if you don't get any more, etc., obviously. The dosage. What happens? Well, that material obviously stays there circulating in the bloodstream, but there are also cleansing organs within biology. There's a part that's eliminated through the lungs, which is the main route. There's a part that's eliminated through the skin, which also leads to those famous itches they called monkeypox. There's a part that's eliminated by cleansing organs such as the liver, which led to what they called hepatitis. And it was a combination of, they told us, the coronavirus, you'll remember, and the flu, and of course the kidney, whose function isn't just to filter water and liquids from food, it also filters the blood. And how is the blood of these people who have been contaminated? Therefore, what's going to suffer? The kidney. So look at how the symptoms they mention, the general ones, coincide with acute radiation syndromes. And the specific ones at the lung level will coincide, I'm telling you now, with those who've been relatively recently inoculated, jabbed. And the second, the severe renal cases, which I'll include colon cancer in, for example, will coincide with those people who were inoculated not so recently. Remember that later we'll talk about emotional management of the whole situation they're going to make us human beings live through, both the unconscious and the conscious, and what we can and are willing to do, and above all, how we're going to emotionally manage everything they're going to make us see, what they'll make us see, and what they'll put us through, because we're going to see horrific images. And the episodes of 2020 won't just repeat, they'll get infinitely worse. I'm telling you now. Let's watch another video. This one here.
Previous outbreaks of Hantavirus, transmission between people has been associated with close and prolonged contact, particularly among household members, intimate partners, and people providing medical care. That appears to be the case in the current situation.
That's what's happening, though obviously it's not what's happening. You already know what's really happening regarding the 26 gigahertz, especially in ports and cruise ships docking in ports or at airports. That's why there are outbreaks and cases on planes. And later we'll see it in stadiums and concerts. He mentioned close contact. At first it wasn't, it was very difficult, but bit by bit all their news will converge on the idea that practically everyone has to be infected. Well, because indeed the global 5G network and the 26 gigahertz within 5G advanced or 5G plus technology, whatever it's called, will expand globally. Who will it harm most? The inoculated. But that doesn't mean it won't harm everyone. Later we'll give some guidelines on what we can do. I'm telling you now, those of you who have the chance, start making all the logistical arrangements you can to flee the cities, literally. And those of you with a rural setting, which I've been warning about here for over 5 years, you'd do well to go there. But starting now, I'm going to do it, obviously. Let's watch another video. We'll translate it as well. Here they talk about infection through close contact. Where will these close contact circumstances occur? Well, at concerts. But there's an event that will suit them perfectly, lightly scheduled for this purpose in date, time and place, which is the 2026 World Cup. Here, both us, who know what's going to happen, and you've seen it, that the 26 gigahertz, so they can send photos of Ronaldo or Messi much faster and meet the demand of thousands of spectators, they tell us, that's the excuse, they'll implement 26 gigahertz in stadiums. But by feeding the official version and that of the ignorant human beings, unfortunately, who are going to fall for it later in this one too, and it will be the last, they feed the idea that everything will spread there. Because close contact does happen, right? At World Cup, couples go. Didn't he say couples? Intimate people. Let's watch another video talking about the Andean variety. What bad luck we're going to have that the one that came from Antarctica in the mouse, and the mouse, because of the photographer who took the photo of the crap in Patagonia, was precisely the Andean one, they tell us.
In theory, it was held that person-to-person contagion, in general terms, of hantaviruses was not easy, or that it was almost impossible. But it has been shown that the variety that is there in the Andes, in that region, Argentine, Chile, and that is not the case.
And why hasn't this happened before? Why does it happen exactly now when you start emitting 26 gigahertz? Another great coincidence.
That is not the case. Direct person-to-person contact has been demonstrated in previous outbreaks. How has it occurred? How does it occur?
Do you see how clearly you can see that this one is lying consciously,
How does it occur? Well, man, through close contact, as has already been said, between the infected and the healthy person. But let's also not forget something that was very important and was much debated, remember, in COVID, which is through aerosols.
Now you're going to say that the crap floats in aerosols.
That is to say, the fact that an infected person who has an obviously respiratory problem at first and who may be expelling viral particles into the environment and who is in a small room and there are more people uninfected and they are there for a certain amount of time, those people, some of them, can get infected. That's been proven, Christina. It's just that it doesn't offer any such.
It's been proven? Where? In fact, the myth of contagion has not been proven. I won't go into that, as that's their business. We must be smart and talk specifically about emotional management and resource management, meaning our energy levels and where to focus them. Obviously towards the head, also at this one. With all this, what it's feeding is the use of masks. If you notice, remember that the masks they recommended were the FFP2, which is precisely made up in its official version. Comes from the factory made of what material? But also those other blue ones, they sold so much, also come seasoned with that. So you already know what you have to do with that. Later, we'll give you all the instructions. Let's watch one last video. Remember that we are in the fictitious scenario. Here we are told about the incubation period. Now we'll see why.
Well, the incubation period's around 45 days. That's the incubation period.
And how do you know? 45 days.
The length of time we consider that people have to be in quarantine will depend on these technical meetings we're having, where it will be determined when we consider day zero of that contact to be. The Spaniards who are on board, who, as I say, 13 passengers and 1 crew member, will be evaluated, will be examined when they arrive in the Canaries, and will be transferred by military aircraft to the Torrejón military base, and from there to the Gómez Ulla military hospital in Madrid, where
Madrid, another place where the 26 hertz are, they'll remain in quarantine. She's justifying the lockdown, the social isolation of human beings, and one very important thing. Don't you consider 45 days, a month and a half, to be a very long presumed incubation period for a virus? Do you know why they've gone for 45 days? Because we're at the very beginning of May, and they're supposedly going to imply that a number of infected individuals will go to the World Cup, which is exactly 45 days later, right in the middle of the World Cup and begin to spread the virus there. You see? So anyone who's intelligent but starts from erroneous knowledge in the official version is going to fuel this whole ruse. They'll say, in their logic, of course, since the incubation period was 45 days, these people were already infected before. They've turned up at the World Cup and spread the virus here. And then you'll understand The Economist magazine and its colour, how it predicts, once again, that right after the World Cup and the ball that lasts for 3 months, from July or August, there's another implementation process. And you'll say, but they already have the vaccine. Yes, now we're going to look at the patent and you'll see that it's already working, huh? Well, there's no need to listen any further. This woman is an anaesthetist. She's a nurse, nothing more. But unfortunately, she is the health minister. Of course, they've called the shepherds back. Primarily the state security forces and bodies, national police, civil guard, and so on. These are the very same people you're going to see again physically assaulting a neighbour who's simply trying to get some exercise on the beach alone, or who come because they've been summoned by a balcony Nazi, as we used to call them, just because they've spotted someone not wearing a protective face mask in the street. This is the primary task that, unfortunately, 90% of the state security forces and bodies are going to carry out. Watch out, because they've already been given instructions. They've been given an action protocol. This is the website of the Unified Police Union, Initial Action Protocol for police members against Hantavirus. And they'll be the first to get jabbed or to have implants. Following the emergence of information regarding cases of hantavirus infection detected on a cruise ship, you already know what it's really about, coming from Argentina with a possible destination of Spain. By the way, these two cities are no coincidence. Sorry, these two countries. In Spain, we were pioneers in the analysis, and in Argentina, let's say, in repeating it with Dr. Martin Monteverde, with Lorena Di Blasi, etc. In order to guarantee the safety and health of the members of the national police who could be exposed, and based on the information that is said, well, be aware that they're already giving instructions directly. And those legislative changes they made in 2023 in cases of health crises, national security events, as is allegedly the case because of a stowaway mouse, they have the legal capacity to allegedly lock people up. And in fact, they remind you of it. Later, we'll see what we'll do. Health authorities claim they have legal instruments if the passengers of the hantavirus ship refuse to quarantine, but this'll be you later. Legal instruments, she said, to protect the population. Obviously, they're not going to protect you because the radiation that's buzzing you, you're receiving the dose of radiation. What's more, they're going to do the exact opposite to you. They're going to tell you to protect yourself with this. You already know what happens. And they're going to tell you to protect yourself with this and in your home. To no one. And of course, the fact of setting an alleged incubation period of 45 days, you can imagine how long the lockdown or social isolation in the stay at home is. We've been saying it for years. The objectives of these people, when I say these people, you already know who I mean, are social isolation, you already know what for. The sharpest ones in the 5th column, and of course, massive implantation processes. You also know what for. Ultimately, hybridization, and I'm not talking about genetics. And of course, evidently, they're going to fuel all this with news like this. The UK detects another possible hantavirus infection, and the WHO is already calling for masks. You see, I remember what I said about the masks. The one they recommend, like the one this lady is wearing, is the FFP2. Look up the information and you'll see that they're actually made of graphene in their composition.
Because a specific model is being investigated, an FFP2 mask model that contains graphene and could damage the lungs. In fact, the Madrid City Council, as a precaution, has decided to withdraw 500,000 units. Teresa Ibora, what are these masks in question like?
Now, if you take a look at this, it is one of those recalled protective masks that was originally sent over to us from the Henares Hospital in Koflada. So, at first glance, they're similar to other FFP2 masks that are on the market. What's the difference? That this one has graphene. How can we tell? Well, very easily, by reading the technical specifications that we can find on the packaging of these masks.
At first glance, they're normal FFP2s, but in their virtue, they may carry the sin, the graphene with which they've been manufactured.
Graphene is a product that is toxic to the lungs if it is inhaled.
And that's the risk. An alert launched from Canada that points to the possibility of inhaling those graphene nanoparticles that damage the lungs.
And right now, a complete, detailed and scientific evaluation of this specific alert is being carried out.
The distribution of the Shenquan brand masks has occurred in several parts of Spain. In Madrid, 500,000 for the city council.
What we're going to do is proceed with the total withdrawal from all the services that are currently using them.
Also in hospitals like the Príncipe de Asturias, where it didn't reach the professionals.
On the 13th of April, we reported the use of some FFP2 masks in our hospital. The centre's management withdrew them on the same day.
They're masks that in other cases the unions claim have indeed been used.
It's essential to follow up and monitor the health of these workers who've been in contact with or have used these masks.
For its part, the Community of Madrid is awaiting the ruling from the Ministry of Labour. When we reach the decision on whether they should be withdrawn or not, well, we'll logically apply it based on what the Ministry of Labour tells us. The Basque Country and Castile and Leon have already ordered their withdrawal for now as a precaution.
But the blue ones are laced with that material. You can even analyze them by optical microscopy. You can imagine what that material does in a mouth, catalyzing the electromagnetic spectrum at a frequency band of 26 gigahertz. Do you want to know what it does? Today we're going to see it. Look at how graphene acts as a transistor effect at a clock frequency of 26 gigahertz. Blimey, but that's the one in the ports where ships and cruise liners dock. Blimey, but that's the one in airports, which is where planes go, where the hotspots and the antivirus cases are, where they transport the infected. Blimey, but that's the one they're broadcasting now at concerts like maybe Rosalia's. We'll see what news we get tonight and tomorrow. Maybe they won't do it, it's too blatant. Blimey, but that's the one they're broadcasting in airports too, and in football stadiums. But we've got the World Cup on now. This is, just to give you an idea, it's like literally tuning into a frequency to detonate a bomb. The time bomb is in the biology. It has a resonance signal of 26 gigahertz. You're seeing it here. You don't need to know much about waves or wave mechanics or electronics. And it's going to be broadcast. That's to say, the transmitting band is at the same frequency as the receiver gets it. And we're talking about thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of micro and nanoparticles, filaments, microstructures, microsheets of graphene oxide in human biology. We've seen all of them here at La Quinta Columna under the microscope. We've seen them through conferences like the one I did in 2023 in Seville and so on. Can you imagine what's going to happen? The same thing we're seeing now, but catalyzing the actions, which are obviously damages in terms of material toxicities in biology, per unit of time. Let's carry on, or go back to their official version, even though we are, as I say, analysing and acting with discernment on the real version, so you understand, which is where we have to attack, obviously. Isolation with negative pressure and tests every 24 hours. In fact, they've already told us that the PCR's useless, that a negative result doesn't mean what for, or so that you have many more. I've come to estimate that approximately 6 PCR tests, that's to say, introduction via the olfactory nerve directly to the neurons of that material, you know, in the PCR, which is also there, obviously, is roughly like one of these doses, right? So you understand. It's a very crude estimate. It would need to be done much better. But everyone understands that putting something up your nose specifically has a direct route to the brain, to the neurons, especially when it comes to nanoparticles capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier, which is the case. We'll buy 50, 100 PCRs of different brands again, and you'll see that they indeed test positive for water, red wine, beer, orange juice, and a goat. The unspecified car oil, you'll remember it, and they'll do it again. And there'll be people who sell it again, even knowingly. They're taking advantage of the momentum. According to this particular news story, they are actually suggesting you need to do several, even one a day, like a junkie. And of course, some will say, to prepare these kinds of events, from a logistical point of view, there must be some planning, right? They have to do this. In 2020, it happened with the famous Event 201. You'll remember the 19th of October, 2019. A couple of months before, in New York City, participants, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, of course, and Johns Hopkins University, who were the ones with the PCRs, of course. Is there any planning regarding this now to do all of this? There must be some public gallery where someone has had to get together, and even if it's a circus, they've had to organise all this, right? Where have they done it? Well, look where. Some are left. The next pandemic, Hantavirus? Well, the news is from the 10th of May 2021. Who was thinking that a rodent mouse and an Andean variant could transmit to humans? Some will think they're just very Gova. Because it's about GAV. Gavi is the foundation, the alliance. This is the vaccine alliance to which Mr. Sanchez gave a whole host of millions of euros. 500, I seem to recall. And of course, it's Bill Gates. But this man, how clever he is, how intelligent, the philanthropist. He already knew in 2021 that the next pandemic was going to be a hantavirus from mice. And they said they planned it all here because they have to do it from a logistical, practical point of view. And they said, well, and where could the mice, the rodents, be? On cruise ships, because it's the stowaway par excellence in navigation for centuries. They stay in the holds. And they said, well, indeed, the mouse, of course, the mouse. Why? Well, because they knew that the ports were going to emit the first 26 gigahertz. And as they know full well that it's not a virus, but that it's graphene, the 26 gigahertz and the graphene go hand in hand to do harm. And for those of you who have asked, you're about to see warm up, Gilly, the pharmacist. You're coming out again like Horseface and so on. You're already on the side of chaos. You'll be out again soon to feed the idea that RNA technology, which you already know doesn't even exist, that is, there's nothing biological and even less genetic in the injectables, not even, because they have neither phosphorus nor nitrogen, which are elementary particles for life, fundamental atoms for life. And in the independent chemical analyses that have been done and that we've done, those elements don't show up. Well, they'll tell you that mRNA technology or some variant, they'll act as if they were making some variant. That's to protect you from the hantavirus. In other words, implementation, a second massive implementation process is underway. Some who didn't fall for it the first time will fall for it the second. Some who fell for it the first time will fall for it again the second. And this will be the last time, obviously. Look at that. You're going to see a whole world of coincidences. Let's look at this one here. What are we seeing here? I'll make it a bit bigger. Well, it says messenger RNA vaccines, which you already know are fictitious, against the hantavirus. The patent is from the United States, of course. US 2025-0112-787A1. And some will say, worldwide applications from the year 2022 to 2024, it says, And here it says, a solution to the problem of the hantavirus pathology, the design, production and administration of a nucleic acid vaccine. In a way, the nucleic acid vaccine is the mRNA vaccine, well, and all the rest. Listen, and how did they already have a patent for the alleged hantavirus vaccine that the other one in 2021, Gavi, the one from the Vaccine Alliance, Mr. Gates, once again the same actor, already knew was going to happen? And the Economist magazine marks the cruise for you, and then on the other cover, we'll see later, it marks the timings. But these people are so clever, so intelligent, because some sharp person will think these people have so many resources and are so intelligent that they're able to anticipate what's going to happen. Later, we'll talk about what we do to stop this, if it really can be stopped. We're going to protect ourselves, we'll talk about all this. And of course, there's already news where they allegedly make people believe that while we're talking here, and this will have very little reach, I'm telling you now, in the sense that my video won't appear in the official media, where we can even show evidence, they're going to make people see that they're already working on a vaccine. Look at this. Moderna announces accelerated work to develop a vaccine against the hantavirus, and they also tell you, and it's up 14% on the stock market. This is also to feed the belief that they do everything for money, and many of you, unfortunately, for a long time have thought the same. This isn't due to money, although they use money to a certain level, which is to pay all the sellouts who are going to buy masks, who are going to sell them, and so on. They're going to make a killing, but they don't do it for money. This is a filtering of the entire human race. Of course it's prepared. Or another news item in this regard, which is this one here. Defense orders the acceleration of production for the main drug against hantavirus. And the main drug, look which one it is, ribavirin. What was there? But it's actually not a hantavirus, it's radiation. And ribavirin, as they call it, apparently has promising results regarding this thing they call hantavirus. Well, now look at the other news item. As we always do at La Quinta Columna, living in a real world, although those living in the fictional world think we're the ones in a fictional world. Look at this. The use of an antioxidant with ribavirin to prepare a medicine for the treatment of a viral infection. The thing is, it's not a viral infection. It's poisoning mediated by that material you know very well, which causes precisely oxidative stress, which is radiation. So, what do you counteract oxidative stress with? With an antioxidant. As a matter of fact, it's this antioxidant that's actually curing patients and not ribavirin, which they'll use as an adjuvant supplement to this, with the rather misleading justification that it'll cure you. Do you understand? Let's share the Economist magazine now. Well then, look, we're in May. In May, there's an implantation process. You see it here. That is, this is related to the hantavirus. Now comes June, which is the World Cup. You see the guy with a little ball, which extends into July as well. From the 13th of June until about mid-July. This is where the alleged dissemination comes in. And in August, what do we have? Besides the eclipse and everything else you know about, the jab. Second process of mass implantation. And in September, you can imagine the worst. A tank appears here, but we'll analyse it more deeply in future programmes anyway, all right? And some will say, how do they know this? Well, bloody hell, because they plan it. Because they stage it. Because they are the main active protagonists. We're the passive ones, those who suffer the consequences, both those of us who know and those who don't. Now, let's talk a bit about what I said at the start, about what we can do. Remember, we've used the scientific method, starting from a hypothesis that was logically radiation, and we've reached the source, where we've seen a coincidence even of all the cities where there are allegedly outbreaks with all the cities that are level in our country in Spain. where there are precisely hotspots but a 5G at 26 gigahertz. And curiously, they coincide in time, place, and specific location. Ports, airports, football stadiums, and concerts. That's the example we've seen in our country. We've talked about the level of impact, how 26 gigahertz affects the entire population. Well, the whole population in a general way, generic symptoms. Practically at every level, ranging from neurological conditions to cutaneous issues, extending through to cardiac problems, affecting the circulatory system, and so on. But generally, the first symptoms are blurred vision, difficulty concentrating at a neurological level, skin problems, itching, and so on. Minor arrhythmias, tachycardias, fatigue, especially this extreme kind. Asthenia, the difficulty catching your breath because you feel like you're suffocating due to that impact on the oxyhemoglobin molecule, which is what carries oxygen. And of course, minor bouts of fever. So of course, in this scenario, they've laid out in a fictitious way, how are you going to pass asymptomatic or asymptomatic and so long? And after that, you know what follows. As for those who aren't inoculated with anything, that radiation affects everyone. Equally, of course, it has a gradient effect, meaning the closer you are to the source and the more time or dosage you store in your biology, the greater the damage. Later, we'll see what we're going to do in that regard, or what we should do and what we're willing to do. People who are misnamed as vaccinated or with multiple PCRs, which will affect more at a neurological level recently, and when I say vaccinated, I don't just mean what they've called COVID, but the flu, even dental anaesthetics or general anaesthetics in surgical procedures, as we know it contains that material, they're going to see a catalyzation of all those effects we mentioned at the start. But above all, it'll affect the pulmonary level initially. If the inoculation is recent, that material starts to be eliminated at first, mainly through the pulmonary route, up to more than 50%. So what they're going to see when they do those CT scans will be those black spots in the lungs that they'll associate with pneumonia, or now what they call the Hantavirus on the x-rays. But it's that diffuse material which is indeed graphene. That's what's going to be seen, this live stream. If they don't cut it, we'll see. And those who carry, in addition to all the symptoms you know at a cardiac level, myocarditis, pericarditis, express cancer as a result of a build-up of free radicals over time that the body can't handle, maintaining chronic inflammation of the tissues. It's madness. People who have been vaccinated, but not recently, where a certain amount of time has passed and that material's no longer in the pulmonary tract, at most it's at a neurological level, some at a cardiac level, which are the two organs where that material stays the most due to its affinity as a superconductor. They are somehow going to be implanted in human biology or stay longer in those areas where there are electrical impulses, and that is our natural oscillator, which is the cardiac system and of course the central nervous system and also the peripheral one, but especially the central one, the human brain at a neurological level. Those people are going to have more damage in their cleansing organs. If they haven't mentioned it yet, I'll tell you now. It's going to be the liver and especially the kidney. As a result of filtering and cleansing, both of them, the contaminated blood over time. Even if most of the material has been eliminated through the pulmonary tract, when that material keeps circulating through the circulatory system, the famous rouleau effect as a result of radiation, clumping of red blood cells, that leads to a lack of blood supply. We're then going to see strokes, ischemia, heart attacks, etc. Also, sudden deaths from arrhythmias, especially at concerts, stadiums, etc., like the one in Seoul, or like that concert in Texas, which you'll remember. But above all, for these people, the renal tract is the most affected. Lithosis from that material, even chronic inflammations that are going to end in colon cancer, etc. And the chronology, this is important. Right now, we're in May. They're preparing the whole fictional scenario. You already know the real one. We'll see what we have to do. In June and mid-July, the World Cup arrives. They're going to use it as the focus for the fictional dissemination of a virus. And obviously what's being disseminated is the global 5G advanced or 5G plus network at 26 gigahertz, especially in football stadiums, and especially, and in a very particular way, in the 2026 World Cup, because of the public attendance it's going to have. In August, what do we have in August? We've talked about it from program 10 of the logbook until 14:15, and we're still talking. During the famous solar eclipse, to send a clear signal, currently via satellite at 26 gigahertz, it is essential to have zero electromagnetic noise. To do this, they're going to combine the eclipse, which for 15-20 minutes, we're going to shield all the electromagnetic noise coming from our star, the sun, wherever it is, we won't go into that. And they're going to combine it with a blackout probably, which they've been hinting at since 2025, specifically the 19th of April. You'll remember it. And the idea is already being pushed on us, as we've seen in some programs, that at any moment there's an imbalance in renewables. It's all rubbish. They're going to artificially shut down the planet. And they'll make it coincide later with the famous 3 days of darkness. And what you'll see through the window won't be zombies, nor a zombie pandemic, which we'll talk about now too. They'll be hybrids. When there's zero electromagnetic noise, signal and transmission of the 26 gigahertz, but now via satellite, that is, we've also seen it in the news, we can post it, more than 12,000 Starlings and projects even from our own country. I don't recall the satellite right now, but there were 2, you'll remember, and a third as a replacement. The 26 gigahertz will now be sent via satellite. And remember the resonance characteristic of graphene introduced into biology. Recently, as The Economist magazine tells us, from July and August, in that mass implantation process, because there's a Hantavirus feeding the fictitious imaginary scenario, after that recent implantation, 26 gigahertz via satellite, and of course at ground level too. A planetary cobweb at ground level and a cobweb at, let's say, an aerospace level. So in September, what do they have? In September, we'll probably have what they've called the zombie pandemic. The one Sanchez said was the only one he was missing. And I said, well, you're going to have it.
Short of a zombie invasion, this government's faced unprecedented situations, such as a pandemic, the worst in a century.
They'll surely say it's a combination of Hantavirus, norovirus and coronavirus. Keep this extract, because I don't know if we'll have time to show it in the very near future. Now we're going to move on to the second part of the program. What can we, as conscious human beings, knowing what's going to happen, and what are we prepared to do? I'm not going to incite anyone to violence, to take up arms, as someone out there has said. They're obviously lying. And by the way, enough of talking about oneself. We must help others. That's what's important there. I could be out for beers today on a Saturday, but I consider this to be extremely important. In fact, it's one of the most important things that have been said on La Quinta Columna. What we're saying tonight. What are we prepared to do once we know the real scenario? Well, for those of you who have the possibility, and I at least am going to do it, leave the cities and do it right now. At the very least, start preparing the logistics for it, towards rural environments, and of course, far and away from electromagnetic pollution and those 26 gigahertz. Even if you're living near antennas, your biology cannot withstand a change in the new technological implementation. Remember Thomas Cowan's video? Every time there's a technological quantum leap, biology undergoes a process of adaptation. Needless to say, for those of you with the receiver at those 26 gigahertz and that resonance frequency, there's nothing to be done. Flee the cities if you want to literally save your lives, quite apart from what others might do. And by others, I mean the state security forces, your neighbour who'll accuse and point at you, and so on. This is going to be hell. It's just the reality. And it's already here. And those who can't leave the cities, you must openly consider more than just the possibility of literally disconnecting the mobile phone transmission towers. I'm not talking about burning bridges. I'm talking about completely severing ties in a civilized way. You have to consider, if you want to keep living there, literally disconnecting the phone antennas that are now going to transmit at 26 gigahertz. Not everyone has this device, which costs over €1,000 to know when they start transmitting. And in fact, if a burst of 26 gigahertz catches you for minutes, that dose of radiation, especially if you've been inoculated with that resonant material at this frequency, you won't survive it. Regarding the restrictions, we've already spoken about the masks. They're already talking. There's a feeling in the air that they're trying to enforce their use. You already know what masks are made of, especially the ones they recommend, the FFP2. Can you imagine that material catalyzing in the mouth, acting practically like antennas and receiving that resonance frequency at 26 gigahertz? But what's more, the mask unbalances the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide, carbonic anhydride. Do you know what the effect of that is at a brain level? And you already know what they're looking for in the head. We know it already, don't we? Under no circumstances should you stay at home for long periods, regardless of whether they talk about social isolation and quarantine. Go out to the countryside, anywhere, far away from here, from the antennas, but don't stay at home for long periods. They're looking for social isolation and continuous chronic depression in human beings. You already know why, because that's the trigger for hybridization. Outside always. If they say stay at home, especially when they say stay at home, you head for a rural environment, avoiding persecution and so on. Anywhere. And you have to start planning this right now, because you've seen how long they've been planning their scenario, since 2021. And of course, it goes without saying, those of you who have implants have even more reason to leave, and those who don't, of course, don't do it. You're literally putting in a time bomb, and now you're going to see its action catalyzed over time much more quickly. Much more quickly than the 4. Because it runs at a frequency that is precisely the resonance effect, the amplifier or transistor effect, which is 26 gigahertz. At 26 gigahertz, the graphene moves. Transistor effect. IBM manufactures graphene transistors at 26 gigahertz. Now, the moment we talked about so much before has arrived. Regarding the management and mental resources, under no circumstances, be smart. Don't waste a single shred of energy, not just on trying to convince anyone, but on even trying to dismantle the false, fictitious arguments of the official version. Don't take the bait. Instead, direct your energy towards attacking the target directly. That is to say, look, there's 26 gigahertz here, and this started in the ports. And in the ports, 26 gigahertz is being introduced. Look, in the airports, there's 26 gigahertz, and the 26 gigahertz is happening on the planes. And your cases are happening on the planes. That's what hurts them the most. It doesn't hurt them if you take the bait, stoop to the level of their official version, and start arguing openly with them about the use of masks. We'll leave that to Natalia Prego, Albarracin, and the fake doctors for truth, who will take the bait again and return to action, knowing full well, as Albarracin said, that nanotechnology and antennas were affecting things, as he said in that interview in December 2020 on Channel 5 TV.
Please, and this is what they want to put into our bodies. Please.
I'm afraid so.
It's not fair, Doctor, it's not fair. It's not fair how they're deceiving us. They're treating us worse than ducks. Ducks have a better life. And I really love animals.
Well, yes, because animal vaccines, curiously, don't contain metallic nanoparticles, as human ones have been shown to.
Oh, right. Well, you've made me, Doctor. You've made me feel much more at ease. Yes.
Nanotechnology.
This nanotechnology innovation, Doctor, is it actually a reality or not?
Well, let's see. Metallic nanoparticles, that's known because the doctor in biotechnology and her medical husband, Antonietta Gatti and Stefano Montanari in Italy, already published a paper in 2017 where, analysing via electron microscopy with an X-ray microprobe, they found a lot of metallic nanoparticles that are hyperreactive in human vaccines. They studied the animals and it wasn't there. So naturally, they ask how it's possible. This can't be accidental contamination in the manufacturing process. And if it is, how is that possible, right? What happened? They silenced them quickly. They silenced them and threatened them. So that's how it stands. From here on, there's talk of the possibility of nanotechnology. Well, the expert there is the Doctor of Physics, Anna Maria Oliva, and she has made she's sent out some messages, some warnings, because we can't really know here, we don't go that far, about the possibility of small molecules, even chemical ones, simply that could be activated by light or radio frequencies. Well, then, of course, if on top of that there's an interaction between certain molecules and radio frequencies from the antennas, what could happen there?
Do you remember? If not, we can broadcast it again. Don't feed your fake news into a fictional scenario. Don't forward them to people and tell them, because at most that might serve to make someone doubt, and after the doubt it ends up here. It's much easier to save all that trouble and shoot directly at the bullseye. They're doing this with 26 gigahertz. And the 26 gigahertz do this. And they present you with 3 scientific articles. And the graphene that's in the injectables with a Campra report. Full stop. And now, perhaps the most important thing, apart from the level, there are people who say that if you want to prepare yourselves physically, you can do it. One thing doesn't preclude the other. The fact that you're physically strong doesn't mean you can't be mentally strong or that you're intelligent. Someone came up with the idea that whoever was lean and strong couldn't be intelligent. Apart from what you can do with your physique, the most important thing here is mental strength and how you have to manage your emotions. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that you have to mentally accept very, very unpleasant consequences. And unfortunately, everything we've lived through, especially in 2020-21, must serve as training for it. Look, if in the first round or phase, the first implantation process, you saw your father, mother, even children fall, some of you, acquaintances, friends, etc., who are gradually disappearing from your surroundings, you're going to see this now on a massive scale. Not yet, probably from August, because now they're preparing the pre-scenario and the world stage will be the world stage from June and especially from August, as you've seen in that timeline we've made. From now on, we can probably see, from that date, people from our surroundings disappearing, very dear ones. What can we do about it, beyond what we've already done? Nothing. If you think you can do something, do it. But if they really believe that whatever you say brings on that translucent look, you know what it really means. The 1,000-yard stare. Don't waste your time. Waste your time with those people who are worth wasting time on, who have at least raised a doubt, a strong suspicion, and who know that they won't fall for it. We're going to recruit them for an army of human beings, because soon what's coming our way is chaos. So accept mentally very unpleasant consequences. Sickness, death and madness all around us, directives to the state security forces, possible army intervention, nonsense like you've never seen. Especially because this one is more deadly, and I'm not talking about the virus. I'm talking about the 26 gigahertz. And of course, the feelings that any human being with the capacity for empathy and far from the neuroticism and psychopathy they might have will be helplessness, above all helplessness. frustration, apathy, anger, even aggression, the right to revenge, and various other feelings. You have to learn to handle all of this emotionally in the most stable and balanced manner. Ultimately, keep in mind that the final word on everything belongs to that balance we call creation. Everything, unfortunately, happens for a reason which we want to pass very quickly. In the meantime, survive. In the meantime, do your best to protect your physical integrity and your head, for God's sake. On a mental level, I mean. Don't get caught up in the grip of all the lies they're going to tell you here, nor get involved in those stupid efforts of wasting energy to protect them from something. Nor to try to convince anyone. You won't convince them of anything. They've had plenty of time to be convinced, and they're already part of that army. They can't even be considered human beings anymore. I'm not going to leave much more time for today's program because what I want is for that message to be clear. We'll make some clips starting tomorrow, and through the altruistic translation team, truly altruistic, of La Quinta Columna and Miguel Angel. We're going to translate this video into several languages so that people have the chance to understand what they're going to do to them. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your attention. See you in the next one where we'll continue working on all this. Good night.
Eso que no nos mata, nos hace más fuertes. Friedrich Nietzsche. Quiero que recordéis que ningún bastardo ganó jamás una guerra muriendo por su patria. La ganó haciendo que otros pobres, estúpidos bastardos murieran por ella. Cuando erais niños, todos admirabais a los campeones, al corredor más veloz, a los ases del fútbol, a los boxeadores más duros. Aman al ganador. No pueden soportar al que pierde. Juega siempre para ganar. Yo no apostaría el pellejo por un hombre que estando perdiendo se ríe. La sola idea de perder nos resulta odiosa. Nuestro ejército es un equipo. Vive, come, duerme y lucha como un equipo. Todo esto de la individualidad es solo basura. Los que escribieron esa majadería sobre el individualismo no conocen de una verdadera batalla más de lo que saben de fornicación. Ahora tenemos un mejor equipo, un mejor espíritu y los mejores hombres del mundo. Compadezco a esos pobres contra los que vamos a luchar. Por Dios que así es. Algunos de vosotros estáis dudando de si tendréis miedo. Eso no debe preocupar. Deseo recordaros otra cosa. No quiero recibir ningún mensaje que diga estamos aguantando nuestra posición. No aguantamos nada. Que aguante el enemigo. Nosotros avanzamos constantemente y no tenemos ningún interés en aguantar nada excepto al enemigo. Vamos a agarrarle por la nariz y a darle un puntapié en el trasero. A patadas enviaremos a esos teutones al infierno, acabando así con ellos en un santiamén. Sin duda habrá algo que podréis contar cuando volváis a vuestras casas. Si dentro de 30 años, sentados junto al hogar, él nos pregunta ¿qué es lo que hicisteis? No tendréis que contestarle, pues acarré estiércol en Luisiana.
Empower Translations. Translations for all humanity.